It was in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar that he was having dreams, and his spirit was troubled. And in this dream he saw this great image. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 32, it tells us that this image's head was of fine gold. His breast and his arms were of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part of iron and part of clay. God gives Daniel the interpretation of the dream, and Daniel reveals this to the king. He tells the king, "Thou art this head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar, who is king over Babylon, is the head of gold." Then Daniel tells him, "After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee." We know that when Belshazzar is assassinated, Belshazzar comes after Nebuchadnezzar. He's king over Babylon. And the night that he is killed, the Medes and the Persians take over Babylon. That means the breast and arms of silver is Media Persia, and it's inferior to Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. Daniel continues, "And another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth." Following Xerxes' rampage throughout Greece, a little bit after that we have Alexander the Great and his conquest all the way throughout Persia. Alexander moves like an unstoppable force. His campaign runs for about 15 years. He dies of all places in Babylon around the age of 33. But his empire of Greece would be the third kingdom that represents brass, belly and thighs of brass. The fourth kingdom is the legs of iron. This is where things get interesting. Daniel says, "The fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise." What ancient superpower emerges after Greece? That would be Rome. And how does Rome operate? Rome splits, breaks, cracks, and bruises the whole world into pieces. Now notice here when we get to his feet that are part of iron and part of clay, I didn't put a number 5 here. And I initially did, but I changed that because I'm reading the context more clearly. There's no mention of this being the fifth kingdom. Rome represents the legs of iron, and that will transform into the feet that are part of iron and clay. It's not a different metal. You see, it's still iron. Rome doesn't fall. It simply transforms. And in modern day, they talk about a phoenix rising. It's in a lot of literature, a lot of media. And when it ultimately does that, it becomes the beast. Verse 41. "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay." We know that Rome is iron, and we know that when Rome gets to the point where it's at the feet, that those feet will be a mixture of iron, the iron of Rome, and clay. Now at this point, I need you to think in your mind about spiritual wickedness in high places, principalities, powers, dominions, all those things that Paul wrote about, because there's something spiritually supernatural behind each of these. Because we wrestle not with flesh and blood. Caesar might have just been a man, but there could have been some Caesars out there that weren't just men, if that makes sense. Because that's what this sounds like. We're getting to a part where iron's going to be mixing with clay. What is clay? And what is potter's clay? We know that that is mankind, right? We were made from clay. So when we see a mixture happening, if we are clear on what has happened in Genesis 6 with the reason that the flood had to happen and that it wasn't just because men became evil, but because all flesh had corrupted itself upon the face of the earth because of the sons of God who came down to the earth when they saw that the women who were born to men were fair, that they were beautiful, they lusted after them, and then they took them as wives. They bare children to them. Those children became giants, which were men of old, heroes, mighty men of renown. These are like the old lowercase gods. And the entire world was filled with violence. Every single animal, creature, species was no longer what it was originally intended to be. It was like Jurassic Park worldwide, and God sent a flood, sparing just Noah and his family. Because Noah was perfect in his generations, his bloodline, his genetic code had not been tampered with. So if you're following all that and you're looking at this mixing again, and you can recall that Jesus spoke of the days of Noah, the days of the coming of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah and like the days of Lot. We had this mixing and this mingling happening between clay and something else. Even in Greek and Roman mythology, they believed in these different eras of time, these different ages. And they believed in a golden age, silver age, bronze age, and then iron age. And then after that, eventually there'd be some kind of renewal, some kind of, great reset, and that the golden age of Saturn would return. And it all of that has to do, the metals getting less and less, all that has to do with Saturn basically being closed off or put away or going off somewhere. And these ages of men with the mingling happening, you just have the residuals continuing throughout the generations until everything's kind of stagnant. And then you need this revival, this replenishing injection of life, renewal, and all that kind of stuff. And that's where it leads back to Saturn, the golden age of Saturn. Saturn returns, Apollo reigns, things like that, okay? So the world's following that. The Hellenistic age, they're following that stuff. It's not very different from this. And if we can piece all that together in the back of our mind, we can see that when iron mixes with clay here, we're talking about the angelic realm, these fallen angels and these demons mixing with mankind, with clay. That's what this kingdom looks like, this Antichrist beast kingdom. Let's read some more. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So what we have are 2 feet with 10 toes, and each toe is a mixture of iron and clay. And if you've read more in Daniel chapter 7 and 8, and you've read the book of Revelation regarding that beast, you'll see that these 10 toes represent those 10 horns on that beast that John sees. It's the same beast, okay? Let's keep going. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So what I said earlier about Genesis 6 is starting to make a little more sense now, right? I hope so, because something strange is happening here. This is what all sci-fi movies have been about for the last 80 years, is prepping you for this weird event that's going to happen. Prepping you for this crazy cosmic collision in the future, the near future. When it talks about them mingling themselves, that's the fallen angels, the watchers, as in the days of Noah. And when it talks about them mingling with the seed of men, that tells us that miry clay is the seed of men, that's us. And that tells us right off the bat that all these other metals are not simply men. these other metals, gold, silver, brass, iron, and iron mixing with clay. It's always been about man trying to be as gods. As we're back in the garden, remember that it was the knowledge of good and evil that was man's downfall, because he wasn't supposed to take from that tree. It wasn't the tree of knowledge, just knowledge. God's not trying to restrict us from having knowledge. But this kind of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, this was not for us. And it says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another. What would that mean, to mingle themselves with the seed of men, but not to cleave one to another? Well, some people think that that means a failed mixture. The mixing doesn't work. That man will try to mix himself with AI or with machines and become, like a cyborg or something like that, and it won't work. I don't think that's what it's saying here. I've just heard it interpreted that way. What I'm thinking that it means is more along the lines of a strange union, if that makes sense. Like, it's going to be symbiotic. They're going to help one another. They're going to support one another in some way, shape, or form. Or it could also mean that they are already here amongst us, right? But that it's not really fully disclosed to everyone. At the same time, what I think it means ultimately is that they're going to be here, this UFO, angelic, Nordic alien race, whatever you want to call it. It's the fallen angels in disguise. And they're going to come down to this earth. I'm assuming, I hope, I'm guessing post-rapture, like right after the rapture, that will come down to the earth like a bunch of superheroes. And there may be multiple offshoots of them, like different branches or different species or different races. They could do whatever they want, whatever dialogue they want to present to Earth, that they're at war with other species and they've come here looking for help. They need our help. They need to work together with humans, or that they've just come here to save the humans. Whatever narrative, whatever story, it's going to be mind-blowing when it happens. But the union that occurs between them, it could be either just doing genetic experimentation. It could be presented in the form of pharmakia, like it is right now. Here's a pill that'll solve all your problems, live forever, and then you turn into a vampire. I don't know. I do know that in those days, at some point along down the road, men shall desire to die. They shall seek death, and death will flee from them. They won't be able to die. So something is going to happen. It likely has to do with the mark of the beast. Again, I don't think that this can happen. The wicked one can't be revealed until he who lets the restrainer is taken out of the way. That's why we're studying this. Let's keep going. Verse 44, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Now that is talking about the return of Jesus Christ with his saints, and that will happen at Armageddon, the second coming of Christ. The rapture occurs, we meet the Lord in the air. At the second coming with Jesus, he returns to the earth with his saints. That's what Jude writes. And Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. Okay, so Jesus Christ is returning with the saints that he raptured before all this hell broke loose. And when he returns with his saints, he returns right outside Jerusalem at Armageddon, Megiddo. That is where the Antichrist and all his armies, his 10 kingdom empire, the 10 toes, that's going to be a mixture of angels and men, are going to come together. And see, they sell this stuff in movies like it's mankind's last stand. It's our Independence Day. It's save the world. from some evil galactic overlord, right? But they're talking about God. They're talking about Jesus. The last thing they want is Jesus coming back, because it's game over, right? So we've been living in this fabricated bullshit world that they've been ruling for a long time, and their time's almost up. So know this, in terms of people asking, where we are today. People would say, okay, well, there's Rome. We look back 2,000 years ago. We can see Rome. We can see the Roman Kingdom, the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. What's the deal here? What's going on? Well, you're right here because you haven't reached the point where you've hit the 10 kings, but at the same time, we're not living in ancient Rome. So where are you? You're right here. You're on the brink of something about to happen. And what I'm positing to you is that Rome never fell, but has continued to do as Daniel said it would, and tread down and break in pieces. And so go ahead and, pull up a giant map of Rome, of the Roman Empire, and then fast forward to today and look at how many cracks appear in the map. Those are the new lines that are drawn to divide territories and rename countries and nations and regions. That's just Rome. And all the symbolism is still there. All the architecture is still there. Thomas Jefferson wanted the Capitol to be built and designed based on a Roman temple. This stuff is still here. It's everywhere. It's not just in the U.S. Rome never fell. United States of Rome, United Kingdom of Rome, USS Rome. You say, okay? People's Republic of Rome. And it's just going to keep doing that because we don't see another metal show up. Another metal after iron? No. The only thing after iron is iron mixing with clay. So what we see is that Rome continues to do this until it changes into the final 10 kingdom Antichrist empire. That's the beast kingdom. And if you're paying attention, you can look up and find out the Club of Rome and look at the map, where back in 1974, they published this map with the whole world broken down into 10 distinct regions, like kingdoms. And if you watch the news today, you'll see how the map kind of keeps changing. And it's going to do that until it turns into its final form, where there's just 10. So there we have it. We can see Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then Rome ultimately turns into the beast. And there's more to this. Now, what do all these nations have in common, all these kingdoms here? Well, they're all Gentile kingdoms. This is Gentile. These are not Jews. And if you've read the book of Revelation, you'll know that all of these kingdoms are being ridden throughout time by a harlot. Some people like to say that Rome is the harlot, but nope. Rome is a Gentile kingdom. Yeah, it has a religious component to it, but it's not the harlot. It's not the mother of harlots, put it that way. We'll get into it in another video. And my final thoughts, I just want to talk about the Lincoln Monument. This thing has 36 columns. Lincoln, his statue, is 19 feet tall. And it looks a lot like a temple. As a matter of fact, if you look right above his head, it says, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved, the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." So he looks like a statue of a god, right? All in marble. And this is his temple. And there's 36 columns that go around it. And this is Greco-Roman architecture. And the thing that's crazy about this is there's a scripture that talks about men with their backs to the temple. They face the rising sun, like they worship the rising sun. And what's crazy is Lincoln, if you look at where he's facing the obelisk across the way, and the sun rises over it. That's why all this is just Masonic, Antichrist, blasphemy. And it's them honoring their gods. So Rome, keep that in your mind. Rome. A lot of people like to think it's USA and all this. No, it's gonna be a harlot riding a beast at the end, Beauty and the Beast. And Beauty gets thrown off the beast and burned with fire. So that covers Daniel chapter 2 and the image, the great image in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That covers that. And after this, we'll be moving into 2 other parts. And it's 2 more of Daniel's visions.